Just to give you a little bit of an update on some situations. We had the one call put out last night. For those of you who probably remember Robert and Kathy Johnson, they were here most recently during our vacation Bible school. Robert taught one day of our VBS, and she was with him. A lot of you are familiar with Dave and Emma or Katie Anderson that attend Collier's Way. Well, that's Kathy's parents. Well, they've all tested positive for COVID, and Kathy is not well at all. She's in the hospital down in South Carolina. They were visiting with their son down there, and he also, and the 2-year-old baby has it as well. They've all tested positive with COVID, as near as I can tell from the stories that I got. I have not heard from them. That's concerning me. I've tried contacting them all day yesterday. I have not been able to hear anything confirming anything. So that's something to keep in our prayers. And also Tina's brother Travis was told that they are going to have to probably put him on a ventilator. So that's not a good thing at all. And he's not very old. He's in his probably early 50s. So that's someone to keep in our prayers. Maybe not even that. He might be in his 40s. Yes, he does. He's in the Butler Hospital. That's completely unrelated from the Johnsons. They were not in contact with each other. We think that probably where the Johnsons came down with it was in Virginia at some point. They were in, Kathy and her mother were visiting some people down in Virginia, and then when they came back, they all seemed to come down with it. So let's keep that family in our prayers. And Tina's brother, of course, he's having a time right now. He went from the hospital to ICU, and then now they're talking ventilator. So, what's that? Who's that? Tina's brother? Well, they said it was a blood clot. I'm not sure. Now, that's what they said, and I've not confirmed this, but a lot of times that's the way COVID shows up in the lungs, too. It looks like a blood clot. So it's definitely a problem that's related to the COVID, though. So they are talking about a ventilator with him, too. So that's very severe. So let's keep those all in our prayers. And with that in mind, let's bow our heads for our opening prayer. Our Father God in heaven, we're so thankful for every blessing you've given us, for the day, for the opportunity to come together and study from your word and to be with those of like precious faith. And we're so thankful for each and every one who is in assembly today that they've come to learn from your word. We ask that you'll bless us in this hour of Bible study, and we may gather from your word the things that we need so that we can live a better life here on this earth. We ask that you'll bless those sick that we just mentioned, and all those who are sick of our number, those who are shut in at home. If it be your will, place your healing hand upon them all and restore them to the portion of health they need and desire. We ask you forgiveness for our sins and help us as we go throughout the remainder of the day's events. We hope and pray that all things we say and do will be in accordance to your will and pleasing in your sight. We ask all of these favors and blessings in the name of our Savior and our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, in Luke chapter 21, a lot of people parallel this with Matthew chapter 24, and it is a parallel, at least for the first part of Matthew 24. I'm personally, my personal take on this whole thing is that it's talking about the destruction of the temple. There is a portion that we might question. There are a couple of verses we might question as to whether that applies to the second coming. Here's the point. As we mentioned before, the coming or judgment upon Jerusalem can be referred to as a coming of Jesus Christ, because it is in that way, and not a literal coming, but a coming in a spiritual coming, a figurative coming, if you will, in vengeance upon the people of Jerusalem for their rejection of the Son of God. And that being the case also, it is typical of the second coming itself. And so there are similarities that may be drawn from it. However, I would hasten to point out that just as Matthew 24 reminds us of that day and hour knoweth no man, And that reference is to the second coming of Christ. When he returns to this earth, when the universe itself, when heavens pass away with a great noise, when the earth burns up and the elements melt with fervent heat, that day is unknown to us. Someone will say, well, are there any signs leading up to it? According to the scriptures, there are none that lead up to it. You say, well, there's lots of things, lots of calamities, things going on. Yeah, there have always been and always will be. All right, so that's no indication. There's nothing that's going to say, that's going to give us any alert to say the day is really getting close now, within a few days, a few years, a few weeks, whatever. There's nothing to indicate that. However, the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem was a different matter, wasn't it? And that's what he's talking about. All these signs that lead up to this. When you see these things, and you know that this is coming. Now, when someone, they're going to read some passages that are going to be kind of confusing here, and I think this is where it's typical of the second coming, but yet not the second coming, not literally. But figuratively, there may be some reference to that, and we'll when we touch on those verses, I'll try to bring that out. But one of the things that's going to happen, he says, during this period of time, they're going to be experiencing earthquakes in diverse places. That means different earthquakes, famines, pestilences, fearful sights, and great signs from heaven. These great signs from heaven that there's an upheaval, something going on. People are going to look to that and they're going to want to cast blame. Guess who they're going to want to blame for these things? According to this passage, they're going to grab a hold, they're going to lay hands on Christians and persecute them. And maybe blame them for some of these things that are going on. He says you'll be delivered up into the synagogues, which tells us that the Jews are going to be a part of the persecution, into prisons, and being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. All this stuff even actually happened in the pages of the New Testament. Just look at Paul and how the Apostle Paul was treated, brought before kings and magistrates, and finally taken to Rome, where I believe, according to the scriptures, I believe there's enough evidence to suggest that the first time he went to Rome and was released, but was again arrested and taken to Rome, and this time was probably put to death in Rome. Tradition holds that he was beheaded in Rome at some point. Again, we don't know the exact time of this, but probably this is probably true. Again, I say probably. You take secular writings with a grain of salt because we don't know for sure. And we don't have the scriptures to bear that out. But we do have scriptural evidence to say that it appears between 1st and 2nd Timothy to be a major difference. In 1 Timothy, he says he has every confidence that he's going to be delivered because the Lord has stood with him. But then in 2 Timothy, you get an entirely different mood. The time of my departure is at hand. I've fought my good fight, I've finished the course, and I've kept the faith. So there's a crown of righteousness laid up. You see, Paul seems to be resigned to his fate. That this is going to happen, and that's okay. He's going to go to be with the Lord. But 2 Timothy, the mood is a lot darker, if you will. A little more depressed. 1 Timothy, a little different situation. So it suggests to me that Paul was probably released, but at some later date, a few years later or whenever, he was arrested again, and this time the outcome was much different. But be that as it may, these are things that did happen to Christians before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And the events in like 1st and 2nd Timothy we're talking about in the 60s, so that's getting pretty close to that time. So all these things that Jesus is saying could be fulfilled even just in the Apostle Paul, but they were probably fulfilled in many other Christians as well. Now, all this being said, that brings us to verse 13, and it shall turn to you for a testimony. Now, that's King James English. It's a little unclear to us what it means. What is it, for example? That's one thing that I struggle with. I had to look at that. What is it? It shall turn to you for a testimony. Basically, the way other translations deal with it, including the English Standard, is that this is the opportunity. You will have an opportunity to bear witness. All this stuff will give you the opportunity to bear witness. So it shall turn to you for a testimony. This is a bad situation, but you're going to make good out of it. There's going to be an opportunity here to bear testimony or bear witness for Christ so that you can answer these people when they accuse you of things, all this stuff that's going on. It's all you Christians. You Christians are upsetting the balance, and this is the reason why we're having all this trouble. A lot of people wanted to blame Christianity for a lot of things. It is reported, this take us with a grain of salt, that Nero blamed Christians for the fire in Rome. There was a great fire that burned a lot of the city down. Of course, there's a lot of traditions that Nero fiddled while Rome burned and all of that. Whether that's all true, we don't know. But it was very shortly after that he enacted policies to persecute Christians. It may very well have been that Nero actually blamed the Christians for that fire. And I don't believe that that's the case, but certainly it's very coincidental that after this, those policies were ramped up. And the Christians were then persecuted very severely. But this was an opportunity that when they were arrested and they appeared before people and before crowds, before magistrates, they would give their testimony. They would bear witness. Now, the idea of bearing witness today, I would be very careful about using the words testimony and witness today. Why is that? We don't have the direct witness. First of all, none of us have ever seen Jesus face to face, have we? Of course not. All right. And even if you haven't seen Jesus face to face, they also had the miraculous gifts of the Spirit as well. And so they could bear record of this. I've witnessed healings. I've witnessed people speaking in different languages that they hadn't studied. I can bear witness that people have prophesied and the events have come true that they prophesied about. They can bear witness for those things. This is a true thing. So bearing witness or testimony, this is something. Can we bear witness today? To some extent, we can bear witness for what the Word has done for us, what we have experienced becoming a Christian. Okay, so we can do that. We can make a defense of the gospel. We can make a great argument for why a person ought to become a Christian. But as far as saying I'm bearing witness, we can't be eyewitnesses to it. We certainly just don't. We're too far removed from that to be an eyewitness. All we can bear record of or bear witness to is the fact of what the Scriptures have done for us. That we can do. All right, so be careful when we're talking about testimonies or witness. That's just like going into a trial. How can you bear witness at a trial if you didn't see anything? They call you to the stand. Did you see the person who was killed? Did you see what happened? No, I wasn't there. Then what are you on the stand for? You see, we can't really say that because we're not eyewitnesses to all these things that happen. Yet we can bear record as to what the Scriptures have done for us. We can do that. And that's a strong case. That's a very strong case. That's why Peter tells us, 1 Peter 3:15, that we are to be ready always to give an answer to everyone who asks us the reason of the hope that's in us with meekness and fear. We can bear testimony to that, can't we? That's something we can do. But we can't say, I've seen these things happen. We haven't. We don't come from that age. We're not witnesses to the miracles. We're not witnesses to Christ himself. So we can't do that. Be careful with those terms. Okay, now in verse 14, he says, Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what ye shall answer. This is the exact opposite of today. He said, settle it in your hearts. Don't get all worked up about this, what you're going to answer, what you're going to say, because I'm going to take care of that for you. Today, if we're going to give an answer, how are we going to do it? Pick it up. Pick it up, folks. Read it, study it. There it is. It's all available to you. That's how we answer today. But back then, they had gifts of the Spirit. And he says, for I will give you a mouth of wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. So at this time, the Spirit would put into their mouth the things that they needed to say. They would be given a mouth. He would answer for them. And that makes perfect sense too. Really, when you think about it, Jesus, through the Spirit, would give them the answer that they needed to make. Because this is bringing about this destruction of Jerusalem. And the reason for things that are going on is not because of the Christians, but because of their rejection of the Son of God. It's not going to go over well with everybody, but it is a good answer. Those who ask the question, when shall these things be? In Matthew's account, we read that this was the disciples or the apostles that were with him and asked, when shall these things be and what signs will accompany it? And then in Matthew's account, they ask another question. The question is, your coming and the end of the world or the end of the age. So that third question is under consideration in Matthew 24, whereas here it's only the first two. That's why I tend to lean more toward destruction of the temple in Jerusalem here in this passage. Even those passages that seem to be talking about end time stuff, and we'll get to that as we look at this. Okay, so he's telling them, I'll give you a mouth. I'll give you what you need to say. Don't worry about it. Don't meditate ahead of time. What am I going to say? It'll be put in your mouth what you need to say. That's not a promise to you and I today. You've got to look at the context of this. This is to those who would be facing this particular situation. We may face persecution today. We may face troubles and trials today, but not this particular one. This one is the one they're going to be given the mouth as to what they are to say. Now look at verse 16. Now this is going to be a problem, verse 16, and then when we get down to verse 18, you're going to be scratching your head here just a little bit. But notice what he says. Ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren and kinsfolk and friends. And some of you shall they cause to be put to death. That's typical of persecution, is it not? That there will be those, Jesus even said that a man's foes will be those of his own household. That holds true even today too, doesn't it? Many times when one obeys the gospel and becomes a Christian, their families may even disown them. And hopefully that's as far as it goes. In this country and in this day, it seems to be that's usually the case, if that goes that far. But there are some places in the world, even today, where if a person obeys the gospel, they are putting their lives at risk, even from their families. Okay? In Islamic-led countries, when a person becomes a Christian, they usually do that very, very quietly and as secretively as they possibly can, because even their parents may put them to death. They might do this and then be told, well, that was even the powers that be, the governing authorities, when they say, well, I had to put them to death because they were infidels, they betrayed Allah, they betrayed Islam. Generally speaking, they don't even get a slap on the wrist for that. What a horrible thing, you know. I can't imagine that. If one of my kids, God forbid, would convert to Islam, you know, I would be devastated, but I wouldn't even think about killing them. I wouldn't even think about that. But then we as Christians thrive in a culture of love and life, whereas they thrive in a culture of death. So there's a big difference in the worldview, very different worldview. So this is the kind of situation they were facing here. Even family would turn against them, turn them over. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. That's true today, even in some cases. There are people in even this country who despise Christianity because they just, I don't know all of the reasons for it. I would say the primary cause for the hatred is the same as, and I can't explain it. Why did Cain hate Abel? Because his deeds were righteous and Cain's were evil. Now, do you understand that? Because I sure don't. I just don't. I don't get that. Cain killed his brother Abel because Abel was righteous and Cain was not. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's wicked people will despise people who are trying to lead a righteous life before God. They despise them. And that very first murder that took place in the Bible took place for that reason. So people will hate Christians. You'll be hated by all men. Hated of all men for my name's sake. That is all meaning, that's hyperbole, of course, meaning the people who are opposing you, of all of them, they will hate you because you are righteous, because you're living a righteous life. Bob? Very likely. Mm-hmm. Right. That's exactly right. And I'm hoping that people will be more reasonable and understand what's going on here. We don't hate anybody, and yet we're being accused of hate crimes. I just don't understand. Well, racism is another thing. Somebody says something. I used to think that this was a good statement to say, well, I don't see color. If you're a good person, I like you whether you're black or white. Do you know that's racist? At least that's what they're telling us today. That's racist. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Racism used to be, when someone just looked at a person's skin color and prejudged them. That's prejudice. And because they had a darker skin or lighter skin or whatever, they just didn't like them. By the way, it goes both ways too. It goes both ways. It's not just lighter skinned people who are prejudiced or racist. If there are racists, then they're on both sides because it goes back and forth. The fact of the matter is, let's look at what the scriptures have to say. God hath made of one blood all the nations of men for to dwell on the face of the earth. We are all descendants of Adam and Eve. Every one of us. We're all brethren in that respect. Every one of us. Now let's approach it from that angle. And that's the way Christians approach it. Okay? And the same thing's true with the LGBTQ, and I don't know how many LMNOPs they're going to add to that. All right? But this group of people today, and honestly, I think it's ridiculous to say the things that they're saying, but I don't hate these people. I really don't hate them. And as far as we're concerned as Christians, we need to work on trying to convert them, reason with them as best we can. But I will tell you this, there comes a point where you're casting your pearls before swine because they're not going to listen. They've got their mind made up. They don't want to hear what you have to say. They're going to hate you. So you're going to get yourself into that situation. We may be getting worse and worse into that. I hope and pray, as we normally do. Many times I do here, even before the Bible class, I'll say a prayer. And I'm thankful we can come together without fear. And I hope it continues for generations to come. I really do. I hope and I pray for that. There's no guarantee of it. We've been pretty blessed. We've been tremendously blessed, I should say, in our lifetimes. And hopefully that continues. Gene? That's a concern. That's a big concern of mine. What's this going to be? You and I will probably not live to see how terrible it will become. But what about our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids? Now we're talking, that's hitting a little close to home too, isn't it? We want the best for them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's the world going to be like? Yeah. I hear people saying that, wicked world. Should we bring kids into it? I mean, maybe we shouldn't even have any. Well, if you don't, it's just going to get more and more wicked. You need more righteous people in the world. Okay, so Christians, young Christians, make those babies, get them out there. Let's bring them into the world and have someone to bear testimony, bear record to the truth. Okay, for no other reason. They say Christians used to be the set of Christians that were pretty prolific. All right, well, be prolific. Go ahead. As far as I'm concerned, the big point is you're going to live. Anyone who lives in this earth is going to die anyway. All of us are. So you bring kids into the world, that death comes to all of us. Grandkids, same way. You don't like to think about that, but that's the fact of this world. So bring them into the world, train them up in the way that they should go, so that when they're old, they don't depart from it. And others may become Christians because of that. We're the salt of the earth. A little bit of salt goes a long way, doesn't it? You don't have to pour a half a pound of salt on a hamburger to have the effect. Just a couple shakes and it does it, right? We're not the most numerous people, but we flavor the earth. We are the salt of the earth. Ron? Right. There is a certain amount of fear that's normal and natural, but we put our faith in God. We know that God's going to take care of us one way or the other. Does that mean he's always going to deliver us from death? Not really. Death's coming, everyone. We understand that. And he's just said this. Some of you, they'll cause to be put to death for my name's sake. Okay, so he's not always going to deliver from death. All right, that doesn't mean he doesn't love and care for us, but we're going to leave this world sometime anyway, somehow. All right, so whatever way, whatever means it is, we got to do that. That's going to maybe shed a little light on verse 18 when we get down to it, we're there now. He just said some of you are going to be delivered to death, but then he says, but there shall not a hair of your head perish. Is that a contradiction? On every level that you look at this, it's not a contradiction. What does he say about our souls? Do our souls ever die? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. After 400 years after they were all dead. He's not the God of the dead, he's the God of the living. So they're alive at some place, in some way they're still alive. In the sight of God, they are still alive. Their souls have gone on. They're not dead that way. Their bodies have died, but their soul is still living. So that's one way, all right? Here's the other thing, and I believe that this is the reference. In this context, he's talking about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. How many Christians died in that event? 1.1 million people, Josephus says, died in this siege of Jerusalem, but not one Christian. Why? Jesus said, when you see these things happen, we're going to read this here down in verse 21. We're going to read the warning he gives to Christians. And Christians are going to take heed to this warning, and they're going to get out. They're going to get out when they have their window of opportunity. Let's hazard a guess on this. How many times do you suppose when the Romans surrounded a city and besieged it, how many times in history do you think the Romans abandoned the siege for just a little while and then came back later? That's unheard of. But it happened here. It happened here. When it was first besieged back in about 69 AD, by Vespasian, who was commanding the army, he got word he needed to get back to Rome. And so they abandoned the siege momentarily, and he went back, and of course, Caligula had passed away, the emperor. And Vespasian was the successor to the throne, so he became the emperor, and Vespasian's son Titus was sent back to Jerusalem to finish the job. That was a window of opportunity for the Christians. Now, what did the Jews think? in the temple, they thought, wow, we got, God is defending us. God is stirring up Rome. He's attacking Rome for us. The emperor is dead. And look, God's fighting our battles for us. We're going to be good. That's not what was happening, though, was it? That was an opportunity for Christians to get out of the city. And they did. They did. When Titus came back, how many escaped from Jerusalem? Probably none. Anybody who tried to escape, they had all the escape routes blocked. Josephus said every time somebody tried to get out, they caught him and crucified him. And they didn't take him down off the crosses. They had crosses all around the city. Kind of poetic justice. What did they do to the Son of God? They did the same thing to him, didn't they? And this is what this is. And you'll notice this here when we get in verse 22. Jesus will tell us why this all happened. Yeah. So not a hair of your head will perish. This is kind of like saying that it's not without God's will. If we die, it's God's will. We understand that. He may say, no, I'm not going to preserve your life this time. You're going to die, but it's okay. It's still okay, Christians. You'll be fine. And it kind of reminds us of Matthew 10:29. 2 sparrows are sold for a farthing, and yet one of them will not fall to the ground without your Father's notice. Think about that. Now, 2 sparrows, you know why they sold them. Okay, that was finger food. All right, that's what the poor people could afford. They would catch them in snares, and then they would sell the birds and you say, well, sparrows aren't very big. They're not. And these ones aren't either. They're a little bigger than our sparrows. They're kind of like about a robin size. Okay, but people could subsist off of them. They could get a 2-for-1 deal, a BOGO, if you will, 1 farthing, and then you get 2 sparrows, and they could feed their family if they had to. It wouldn't be very much, but it would be something. It would be sustenance. All right. So these were considered actually by most people to be pretty worthless, but not in God's sight, because God takes notice even when one of them falls to the ground, not just 2, but 1. All right. So if God notices sparrows falling, what about Christians? All the more, way more, because birds are really, in our sight even, not that valuable, not singly anyway. We all, we like the birds at home. We feed them and watch them, enjoy seeing them, but they're birds, right? And I've mentioned this before. I've been an avid outdoorsman all my life, and I've seen lots of things, but I've never seen this bird flying across the sky, have a heart attack, and fall out of it. I've never seen that happen yet. God doesn't miss one. He doesn't miss it. When it happens, he knows of every one of them. So that tells us something about the nature of God, how powerful he is, and also his compassion for his creation. Now, verse 19 is a very valuable verse. In your patience possess ye your souls. It's of paramount importance here to understand what patience is here, though. We need to understand what patience is. The ESV translates this endurance. We could call it steadfastness, okay? Or a good old-fashioned stick-to-itiveness, all right, if that is such a word. Okay, they use it that way, hyphenated, of course. But what does that mean? When you become a Christian, you obey the gospel, you're baptized, you become a Christian, then what? Are you done? You hang in there. You hang in there. What about when the going gets tough? You still hang in there, right? Still hang in there. What if persecution comes along? What if they're going to put you to death? Hang in there. Hang in there. By the way, that's the literal rendering of Revelation 2:10. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. If you read that literally, what that says, be faithful even if it means death to you. Be faithful even if it means your death. What if someone tells you, are you a Christian? And they're holding you at gunpoint. And you say yes, and then they shoot you. Okay? Maybe they're standing you all up. Are you a Christian? Yes. Boom. Are you a Christian? Yes. Boom. Then they come to you. What are you going to do? Better say yes. Right, right. That would be difficult, wouldn't it? Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. We got to be prepared for stuff like that. In your patience, possess ye your souls. It's an important verse. It's not easy. It's not easy, folks. We have to maintain our faithfulness. We have to maintain it. It's a difficult thing, but we have got to be. Eternity is just too long. In this life, we need to understand that this life is temporary. Everything in this life is temporary, including our loved ones, we ourselves and our loved ones. So we need to get that straightened out ahead of time. Look, we are not going to deny the Lord. We are not going to give up the faith no matter what. No matter what. Good thing to talk out now. Hopefully it never happens. But if it does, we need to be ready for it. Okay, it happened back in this time, so be careful. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. What's he talking about? Second coming at the end of the world? You're going to see Jerusalem compassed with armies. Compassed means surrounded by. Okay, the city of Jerusalem is going to be besieged. And that happened twice, 69 and 70 AD. Okay, they came in, they besieged it, they kind of retreated for a little while, then came back. And Jesus gives all these signs. Now, when this happens, let them that are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them that are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter therein too. Christians took this to heart. They left. When they had the opportunity, when Vespasian pulled back the armies and they had a window, an opportunity to escape, they left. Actually, we know historically they fled to a city on the western side of the Jordan River called Pella, at the foothills of the mountains. And there's where they settled in. And some believe that this is where Peter wrote his letters from, and considered that an area close to Babylon. And they were able to, we know that Peter wrote his epistles from Babylon. Maybe after this besiegement, he writes these letters. Maybe. But remember what the apostles were told to do. They were to wait in Jerusalem. And they did for a number of years. But when this happened, they were told, they were commanded by Jesus to leave. All Christians were, and they did. They left the cities. They fled to the east. And they did. They got out. They were saved. And the reason... Right? I really don't know. But that is a lot of people, according to Josephus. Now, Josephus, I will warn you, has a tendency to exaggerate his numbers. All right, I will warn you about that. Because there are other cross references we can see. Well, he's a little high in his estimation here. But on the other hand, he was an eyewitness to these events too. So we don't want to just throw out everything that he says. But according to him, 1.1 million people were killed in the besiegement, but not a single Christian. Not a single Christian, according to Josephus. And he's a Jewish historian who witnessed this. Okay, so they fled. And he says, for these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. This is the reason this is happening. These are the days of vengeance. Whose vengeance? Rome's? No. Rome is just a tool. As powerful as Rome was, they were just a tool in the hand of God. Who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay? Saith the Lord. He's the one who has the right to exact vengeance, doesn't he? Not us. And that's exactly what's happening here. Vengeance for what? Let's go back a chapter or so here. You remember the story told about the man who let his vineyard out to stewards, and the stewards, when he sent his servants to them for the portion that was due to him, they beat them up, hurt them, sent them away shamefully. And so he said, well, I'll send my son. They'll reverence my son. He sent the son, and they killed him. He said, this is the heir. We'll kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. And Jesus asked, what will the Lord of that vineyard do to these wicked husbandmen? And then Matthew's account says they answered him, well, he'll kill them. He'll kill those wicked husbandmen, and he'll let out the vineyard to someone else. And they answered correctly, didn't they? What did God do to those wicked husbandmen who killed his son? He destroyed them completely, wiped them out. And he didn't just destroy a few of them. He didn't just stop them for a while. Can we have Levitical Judaism practiced today at all? Can't do it. Rabbinic Judaism, which is a very watered down form of Mosaic Judaism, right? From the days of Moses. You cannot trace anyone's lineage back to Levi or Aaron to be a priest or a high priest. You don't have a temple or a tabernacle structure. Even if you did, you can't put it where God said to put it. And right now, where the temple used to be is the Mosque of Omar, the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim mosque. Good luck with trying to get that out of there. Okay? You see what God did? For the last almost 2,000 years, there has been no Levitical priesthood. There has been no Judaism. God called an end to it when Jesus died on the cross. The Old Testament law was nailed to the cross with him, according to the scriptures. But God did give them a space of just a little under 40 years to continue while they have an opportunity to repent, to see the sense in what he's doing here, to see Christianity for what it really is. But you see, he said he destroyed those wicked husbandmen and he turned it over to someone else. And they said, God forbid, heaven forbid that should happen. But it did. Guess who the someone else is? You want to know? Well, turn to your left, turn to your right. That's us. He turned the kingdom over to Christians. It used to be the Jews, the Israelites. They were God's chosen people. Guess who's God's chosen people today? It's us. It's Christians, members of the Lord's church. We are the spiritual Israel. We are the chosen people today. Okay? Now, here's the nice thing about it. The Jews would say, God forbid that should happen. Can the Jews be a part of it too? Yes, they can. Anyone who comes to Christ. But you've got to come to Christ. John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. All right? Jesus said this. So the way to heaven, the way to God and to his good graces is exclusively found in Christ. So are we exclusive? Well, we aren't, but Christ is. There's no other way. We want to get to God. We want to be saved. We've got to go through Christ. And so do the Jews. They're not a special case. I remember Jerry Falwell saying that on television one time when they asked him about people being saved. He said, you got to be saved. You got to go through Christ. You got to go through Christ. He said, what about the Jews? Well, they're a special case. No, they're not. The Jews are saved in exactly the same way as anyone else is today. In fact, Paul recounts that over and over again. If the Jews want to be saved, they've got to come through Christ too. Everyone does. Everyone does. Okay? All right, so these are the days of vengeance. Then he goes on, verse 23, but woe unto them that are with child and them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. The poor young mothers and their babies. What a time that's going to be for them. All right. guys, you need to have a little bit of compassion on these ladies that are leading about their little broods. Okay, that's not easy to do. All right, we don't look at it the same way as the women do. Women understand a lot better than men do, and there's a reason why, because that's what they were designed for. Like, oh boy, I just did it, didn't I? That flies in the face of modern dogma today too, doesn't it? Isn't that what God designed them to be? Designed men and women for different roles? But you got to have some compassion. That's difficult. It's difficult to see the young mothers with their, trying to get them straightened out in services. That's great, though. That's great. I love to hear a baby squalling during services. I really do. Doesn't bother me at all. I'll just turn the volume up a little bit. That's all. And if I can't compete, I'll wait till he's done. He's where he needs to be, folks. Encourage those young mothers. Encourage them. Yeah. Tell them this is where you need to be. God bless you. Okay. I did. I had a granddaughter respond to me. That was pretty good. I did not set that up, by the way. That just happened naturally. I asked a question and she said, no. Very good. That's just great. I love to hear the little ones in here. And I know it can be disruptive. I know it can. Bear with it. This is where they need to be, folks. By the way, the more squalling you hear, the more babies you hear talking, the more fits and temper tantrums you hear, the better the future outlook of the church is. Really is. Because these kids are going to grow up. These kids are going to grow up. And we need them to be raised up so that we can have them to take the leadership reins sometime at some point. Okay? But this situation is going to be hard on them. Because this is going to be a difficult journey. They've got to leave Jerusalem. They don't have time to make preparation. When you get the opportunity, leave. Matthew's account says if you're up on the housetop when the opportunity presents itself, don't go back down in the house and gather all your things. Flee Jerusalem. It said that they had the highway of the rooftops. Along the wall, you could jump across the houses on the rooftops because they were close together. And get out of the city. Get to the gate and get out. Leave as soon as you possibly can. Well, that's going to be very difficult for young women with kids. All right. So if it happens in that time that a woman has a bunch of little ones, how difficult that's going to be for them. Okay. And I think this shows Jesus' compassion on them too. We ought to have compassion as well. Okay. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, shall be led away captive into all nations. Exactly what happened in 70 AD. Most of them were killed with the sword. Others were led away as slaves and never did regain their freedom. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Okay, so the Gentiles are just going to completely overrun the temple, destroy it, and that's exactly what happened in 70 AD. Exactly. Just as Jesus predicted that it would. Okay, we're out of time. Lord willing, we'll pick up there in our study Wednesday evening, verse 25.